Welcome. Thank you so much for joining Connection Awaits today. Paul Bailey from Discover Halifax, and I'm Anna.
I'm Jessica.
And we are starting a brand new series of which you are the first, so welcome and thank you. Yeah, we're doing an insider series on what it looks like to be a destination that is following a sector approach and understanding what that looks like. And you had written a little article on LinkedIn we saw and you piqued our interest. And we thought, oh, this looks like a great idea to put a little bit of a conversation around so we can start demonstrating best practices and put a spotlight on cities that are doing it great. Today, we're going to head up and talk about the Halifax Ocean Hub, if that's okay.
That sounds great. It's certainly something where I think as we move along here, I think a lot of the DMOs that are having success right now are certainly following the same footsteps that Halifax and I'm doing here, which is very much that sector-based approach. Yeah, when we start looking at some of the pieces around that, I'm really glad you liked the article that I wrote. I know we'll dig into it a little bit, but the idea of how we deal with carbon in the environment these days is certainly a big piece. And Halifax is certainly punching above its weight when it comes to how we can make changes or how we can address that through science and better choices moving forward.
Paul, your Halifax Ocean Hub article positions Halifax as first, best, and only in ocean science breakthroughs. Walk us through what makes Halifax ocean innovation ecosystem truly unique on the global stage.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I always try to set myself up and our destination up when we want to really frame things up as first, best, and only. Either we're first in the world or first in the country or first in the region to do something, or we found a better way to do it, or we're the only ones doing it. And what's interesting about that framing when it comes to what Halifax does, we have the privilege of having people in place. So it's not just infrastructure and it's not just about where we live. It's also about all the people that are contributing to that whole concept of first, best, and only. What I'll do is I'll start just really high level and talk about the place itself. The simple fact is we have the benefit here in Halifax of having Halifax Harbor. It's the world's second most deepest harbor, ice-free year-round, and that's not really a result of climate change. That's a result of depth and size of the harbor. More importantly, the harbor spills out into the Bedford Basin. And the Bedford Basin is something where we're going to have salt water. We're going to have a lot of the attributes that you would find in the ocean, but in a much more controlled environment. As a result, I like to view the basin as a living laboratory when it comes to folks that are looking to research or try things before they go out into the big, scary, deep ocean where there's lots of monsters, or at least so I've been told by my daughters. The reality is it's also very accessible. For anyone who's working at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography or the Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship or Dalhousie University or others, it's right there. You don't have to leave Halifax and charter a vessel to take you 100 nautical miles offshore. It's deep. It's got all the pieces that you're looking for there, so you can really test a lot of things in real world conditions. The second part about that is the people and the institutions. From an institutional density perspective, we're unmatched anywhere on the planet or in Canada. The simple fact is we have Dalhousie University here, which is the largest university in Halifax. It really punches above its weight to the point that 25% of all federal national sciences and Engineering Research Council funding and ocean research grants ends up at that university. So as a result, not only are they able to do the research, but they're then able to actually, in real world, go out and actually try to do things within the Bedford Basin. We also have the Bedford Institute of Oceanography, which I mentioned previously. A little over 600 scientists, all based right at the mouth of the harbor where it opens up into the Bedford Basin. They recently opened a $25 million facility for intelligent marine systems. So this is where we start talking about these in AI-based decision making. That's all happening right here as well. And the reason it's happening here is because they're able to then go and deploy, like I said with Dow, in real world environments. And there's the Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurships, COVE. Right now, there's about 65 resident companies, and they've got a wait list of several hundred, I believe, more, just waiting to get in there. They've got a little over 50,000 square feet, and I'm sure that if they could double or triple it, they would, of space for these resident companies to set up shop and begin work from a commercialization or research perspective. But what's interesting about COVE is it's based also in Halifax Harbor. And in this case, they have several 100 linear feet right in front of Cove itself, which is not all that remarkable until you also pair it with the fact that the water depth starts at about 50 feet, all right in the front of Cove. So if they've got a resident company that's not entirely sure that they've got things bolted down or figured out, they can go toss that ROV or that device directly in the water right there on the spot. And if it sinks, I guess they can jump in after it. Or if it swims, that's even better. Simple fact is, from a physical manifestation here in Halifax, we have all the right pieces of place. When it comes to people, we do as well. I did a podcast with Jim Hanlon, who was the founding CEO of Cove, about a year and a half ago. And what he talked about was this concept of collaboration over competition. It's one of those things to have all these people or to have all the funding or to have the place. But the simple fact is Halifax can sell and be represented on the global stage by the fact that everyone wants to work together. You can cross sectors. It can be life sciences, it can be oceans, it can be tech, it can be fin, it can be all sorts of other things. But what it comes down to is people cross sectors and work together for the good of whatever the project happens to be. And we're seeing that come to fruition in a number of ways. Planetary Technologies, as an example, in 2024, I believe, issued a little over 620 tons of CO2 removal credits. And so basically your carbon credits, for lack of better terms. These were bought by groups like Stripe and Fi and British Airways. So in order for them to buy them, they have to be something that are legit, these credits, and they have to also be audited. And they have been audited and validated, which is not something that would just happen anywhere else. The fact is, we see that continuous industrial scale growth taking place in various operations. We're seeing millions of dollars flow into the region because of the research that's happening here, but we're also seeing the impact go globally. And I think that's something that really signals that first, best, and only.
You mentioned the Bedford Basin as the world's living laboratory. So how does having that real world ocean research happening right in your front yard change how you position Halifax for the international conferences when they're coming in?
I think the big thing there for conference goers is they're demanding a lot more than just going and sitting in a convention center. They're now looking to actually go hands-on or have some type of an experience or technical tour or something else that ties what's being spoken about in the plenary through to what's happening in the real world. Our convention center is in the heart of downtown Halifax, and the Bedford Basin is no more than a 5 to 10 minute drive. So you can load folks in a coach if you want and do that. Or what happened a few weeks ago with another conference is they ended up doing real world demonstrations right at the boardwalk in front of their hotel. So you can imagine if it was rainy, they just open the curtains and say, watch outside. But in their case, they took a 2-step walk outside and they were able to see it firsthand. For folks at the convention center who sit through a plenary on carbon removal or those types of things, if it has to do with the harbor, they can do a 4-minute walk down the hill and they can be right at the waterfront to see it firsthand. If they need to go to BIO, it's a 10-minute drive. If they need to go to Cove, I always recommend they take the 4-minute walk to the bottom of the hill and then they take a boat over to Cove and land and dock there and continue their meetings there. The simple fact is, by having the basin so close and the harbor so close, people can move out of the abstract and into the real world. But not only that, but what it can also do is it can allow them to do things within various tracks and living laboratories within the conference that they couldn't do otherwise. If somebody came to Halifax with a convention for sonar and sensing, they could do demonstrations in the harbor, but they could actually have their delegates, guests, stakeholders involved in something like live data collection right there on the spot. We're finding ways to integrate theory and practice together. And that's not something that can happen just anywhere. There's very few cities on the planet that allow that to happen in a breadth of different sectors. And Halifax just happens to be one of them. I'm not going to say we're the only, but I'll certainly say we're the best.
Yeah. Paul, you're really putting a demonstration for the answer we're about to ask you right now on this question here. So we're going to take you down this route of where the regenerative principles are now starting to come into action. And so the piece that we had picked up on from your article was this ocean alkalinity enhancement research.
Yes.
And I would love you to put the pieces together for us. It sounds like that was a possibility where you were able to put cutting edge regenerative work in and provide an experience for delegates. Are we right? How did that work?
You're absolutely correct, Anna. The reality is, I'm very lucky to get to stand in front of some really brilliant people in Halifax and at Dalhousie and St. Mary's, the other universities, but also within the commercialization and collider spaces. And this is certainly one of those examples where I could stand in front of this and help them hoist themselves up to be a part of the narrative. The simple fact is this is something that's happening in Halifax because it's a really important item. Acid in the ocean is a problem. Oceans also have the ability to remove that carbon. It has the ability to do a whole bunch of other things. And frankly, what's happening here is the process is converting that dissolved CO2 into something more stable, which they're then able to go and process and work with accordingly. So you can imagine if you've got a conference that's really focused on the future and sustainability and what we need to do not only to address the outputs, but to address the outcomes. Here's a chance for folks to go down to the harbor and meet with some of these experts, go out on one of the vessels only so far as 100 yards off the boardwalk and experience it for themselves. That's cool in itself, but I think the part that really ties this all together, and I think what you're digging at here, Anna, is the fact they found a way, and other experts have done this as well in Halifax, but when it comes to this program specifically, they've found a way to do it where it all lines up so that there's that comprehensive environmental monitoring, there's that audit component, there's a validation component, which I don't think has been done elsewhere. And those are the types of things where when you bring that and these delegates together, it's, oh, this is interesting. But then you can also tie in community engagement through Cove, through Volta, through Dalhousie University, through NRC, and all these other groups, so that it becomes bigger than just a researcher or a scientist on the back of a skiff going out trying to figure out what's next or how to deal with this challenge around acid in the ocean. Doing so, what ends up happening is you end up with multiple voices with multiple levels of expertise, getting involved and coordinating and collaborating. I can imagine that at the end of the day, should this be the path forward for the planet, it's certainly something where it would put Halifax on the map, but also those who are directly involved at Dalhousie within the research community. I could see it being something where I'd be very protective of that, because who knows, I'm inviting others into the shed, as it were, or onto the boat. I want to keep that for myself a little bit. And I'm a little selfish that way, which is why I never make a good researcher in Halifax. The simple fact is these folks are getting together to figure out the right course forward, and they're doing that together. The other part about this is Halifax is providing delegates with this concrete living example that regenerative solutions can operate at scales that are required to actually make change. And it's really easy to bring people to have that conversation because you're not going those hundreds of nautical miles away. But I think the other part about that is there's a psychological impact as well. People feel hopeful, people feel good, and people, when they witness this industrial scale project that's underway, it creates this cognitive linkage back to Canada and to Halifax. It also creates a bit of an emotional shift that says, yeah, there's a future here and I can be part of this. And maybe I was part of it. And it also validates this whole theory into real world, right? Like we're able to have that delegate validate that both from their own eyes, their own senses, their own hands, their own head. We're not just saying, hey, we can do this, trust us. We can do this and come see it for yourself. The other part about that is right now, the Ocean Alkaline Consortium has about $15 million of funding, which represents the largest commitment of funding out of the Carbon to Sea initiative that they've ever made. And that's happening right here in Halifax. When we start combining sector excellence and expertise with a delegate experience, with research, with commercialization, taking it to colliders, and really beating this into something amazing. It's something that doesn't happen everywhere because one, people are nervous to let others in. I would be one of those. And then number two, just having that ability to take all these aspects of people, place, and product and pull them together is something that's truly unique.
Yeah. Paul, you're describing, if I'm right, summarizing this, that there is this openness to experiment with an audience, to bring the audience along on that journey, inspiring hope at the same time, which goodness knows we all need. So I think you could get very busy just in selling come see the dream. But the other piece I'm hearing now, because the funding side seems to be very well rounded as well, do you think you'll be able to see some lasting impact from that? Will you see some legacy component, and have you already seen them maybe in the ocean cluster area?
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of all this as well. This can't be something where we just sell hope. Hope is a dangerous four-letter word, especially in the hands of the wrong people. The fact is, hope needs to be married with results and legacy. I could hope that my plane's on time. We all know that's probably not going to happen when I fly. But what it comes down to is we are selling something here where we start to talk about legacy, really build everything together. There's three things I like to look at when it comes to bringing convention here, which of course is my area of expertise. There's always going to be an economic impact. People come, they spend money. But the other two are the two pieces I really look to. The other two factors are, number one, putting our locals into an integrated conversation where they can either steer the ship or they can learn from the ship being steered. And then the third part is legacy. What happens 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years after the conference lands in Halifax? And I think a lot of that thinking can be applied back to projects like this one that are underway. The simple fact is they're creating a legacy because the funding is there. They're looking big picture because they have multiple voices at the table, and they're doing it in a way that is inspirational yet outcome focused. And I think that's really important here. The fact is they're trying to find a way to do this without depleting resources. They're trying to do this without taking from others. And I think that's where Halifax really starts to shine.
I love that. We all know that really to have legacy at the heart of things, it needs to be intentional from the beginning. And it sounds like the framework is there. So love that. Thank you.
I love how you said inspirational yet outcomes focused. I really resonate with that. You highlight the collaboration between Dalhousie University, Cove, Carbon to Sea, and Canada's Ocean Supercluster. How can a conference organizer tap into this existing ecosystem to create that more meaningful and connected event experiences?
I'll give you the short answer and the long answer because there's two very distinct ones. The short answer is if you reach out to a DMO within a city, town, country, anywhere like that, and they're not able to answer that question, go elsewhere. The simple fact is there are DMOs out there, and there are folks that would have titles similar to mine where they're selling the shiny and there's not a lot of substance behind it. Your DMO, your contact within a city should be able to answer that question very eloquently and with a lot of detail. The simple fact is they should be able to connect you with the right people so that when you bring a conference or a convention or are thinking about bringing one to a town or city or wherever, that it is more than just a bunch of people getting together in a convention center out by the airport or having a really fancy dinner. We are in an industry where we are asking people to travel. When people travel, they emit carbon. And the simple fact is if you're going to emit carbon and you're going to do something that impacts the broader world that we are all sharing and living in, there has to be a positive outcome. And it has to go beyond I had the best meal I ever had at the nicest convention center I've ever been in. It needs to be more than that. So if your DMO cannot answer that question, I'd say move on. Can't answer that question, then you can call me out. Short answer. Long answer is I like to look at it a couple different ways. And the first thing is, yes, I'm going to connect you to all the right people and make sure that I help you frame up the story. Often what will end up happening is as a conference organizer or somebody who's looking for something different, they're going to come and say, hey, who do you know? What do you know? And of course, I can make those connections. But there's more to it than that. And Halifax provides a comprehensive narrative or story that really starts to link everything together. And I think that's the really important part. I like to view Cove or BIO as that comprehensive industry entry point. It's somewhere where we're going to have a lot of people who know a lot of things and are a lot smarter than the guy you're talking to on this call right now. The simple fact is we start talking about things like advanced marine testing, which of course Cove can offer. We can start thinking about all the scientists that work at BIO that have remarkable results when it comes to understanding the water and things above or in it. When we start thinking about integrating companies into the narrative or the story that you're trying to build for your conference, as I said before, Cove hosts about 65 resident companies right now, and they've got a multiple years long wait list for other groups trying to get in there. But not only that, they have a lot of really cool recent additions, but then they have a lot of third parties that are supporting those residents. So it might be something smaller where you wouldn't know them by name, but then you find out that General Dynamics or Lockheed Martin or the Nova Scotia Community College or Dalhousie or some other large organization is backing them or supporting them. All of a sudden, we're starting to build out a really cool entry point. And of course, on top of that, there is the research vessel integration that can only happen at Cove. The simple fact is you can dock and moor your vessels there and take them on the road, in the ocean at least. The second part about that is we do need to understand what's happening from an academic or research perspective. Commercialization is great. There's a lot of pieces at play there. But the second part, and tightly tied to this, is the idea of integrating research back into that real world. And Dalhousie does that. They have marine environmental modeling groups. They've got a lot of capabilities there. If you go down to Oxford Street, which is where a lot of the ocean-based research and work is done at Dalhousie University, you'll find everything from Ocean Frontier Network to Ocean Tracking Institute and others. You'll find folks like Dr. Fennell, whose group actually works to do a lot of work on a coastal global perspective. And I want to make sure that I get this right. But her big thing is understanding what's happening on a time scale that is not just within the next 3 to 5 years, but multi-millennial. What's changing? What's happening? How is it transitioning? These are things where all of a sudden we can take commercialization and we can add research on top of that. And of course, Dal has multiple PhD students that are just looking to make the next big break when it comes to oceans. Then on top of that, going back to BIO, we can add that multi-dimensional piece on top of that, where all of a sudden we have state-of-the-art capabilities and facilities. We have lots of ways to demonstrate green technology, what's happening there. But then also they've got labs that go from virology labs through to marine mammal labs, Arctic expedition labs, and it just goes on and on. And the fact is you're starting to build something that's far greater than a single voice in a plenary. You're building an entire ecosystem. And that's really what I try to do with my clients. I want to make sure that when this is all said and done, they can't just take one human and put them on a plane and have them speak at Las Vegas. I want it so that they have to bring their humans here so they can experience everything that a city has to offer or that sector has to offer firsthand. And it's not something that can be relocated or replicated elsewhere.
It sounds like a true immersion opportunity. Sorry to use the pun there, with obviously you're surrounded by water. We're going to immerse everyone in your ocean prowess there. But not every destination has this, Paul. So obviously you have the ocean science right there due to geographical reasons originally. So what's your advice going to be to DMOs that don't necessarily have something so unique, or they don't think they do? How do they start to identify and leverage their areas of focus?
One of the first things is they need to just go outside. There's too many of us who stay in our offices and we never go outside and we never start asking questions or getting to know people or building out that network or going out and collecting stories and relationships with other humans. So part of that, the very first thing is just go outside, see what's out there. Go out to your local university. Most of the towns and cities that are bringing conferences, especially if they're considering a sector-based approach, there's going to be universities, there's going to be incubators, there's going to be pieces that they can leverage. Go knock on the door, reach out, go on the website, figure out the about us, find that community connector and go for a lunch, go for a dinner, go for a coffee and just start getting out there. The other thing that you can do as well, especially if you're here in Canada, and I'm sure that other countries would have something similar, our federal DMO, if you want to call it that, Destination Canada, has done a lot of work in terms of understanding what sectors each city is best representing. And it has to do with the depth and breadth of the sector itself, the amount of funding, the amount of academics, the employment, and the list goes on and on. I'm willing to bet that your federal, provincial, state, government, whatever you happen to have, would have a really good indicator of the areas that you're probably first best to know. Actually, since I'm from Halifax, let's go with their second still really good and only to Halifax. Just not only that, but there's going to be investment groups that are going to exist either within your provincial or state government or your municipal government. And they've probably already done a lot of the research as well. Figure out what they're going after and then you line up with them. It's a really good start. The other part is really assessing, holding up what you believe to be true against the whole concept of first, best, and only. All aside, what is it about your destiny that says that you are the best at this? Best in the region, best in the country, best on the planet. What is that first story? The fact is, there's people from around the planet that are brilliant human beings. And I'm willing to bet that there isn't a single destination anywhere on the planet that doesn't have at least one story to tell. And if you line up with the whole other piece I talked about, you're probably going to find you have multiple stories. The other thing is, as a DMO, I think you can force the story about collaboration. If you're in a region or an area that isn't collaborative, and there's a lot of them, you're going to have a heavy lift in front of you. But I think that for the good of what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to have to bring a bunch of people to the table and convince them that collaboration is a good thing, not a bad thing. And then I guess the final part about that is, what is that big, hairy, audacious goal going to be? The simple fact is, if you look at what's happening in Canada's ocean economy, there's a lot of frameworks and aspirational targets out there. Halifax's $400 million research funding coordination goal is aspirational, but it allows people to line up behind it. And the thing is, I'm not going to be the person or working for a DMO that does that, but I'm going to find those stories and I'm going to work within that world to push forward something that's truly unique and interesting to those who are looking to hold a conference or an event here in Halifax. Bottom line, get out there. Don't be afraid to tell the story, but leave your office and talk to others.
Yeah. Very true points. I think you brought up some really good points there, Paul, that are sometimes very tricky. Sometimes it's a case of being a little bit more, I guess, stringent with yourself and making sure that you are definitely in that first, best, only category, because it is very difficult. I know when we started our work many years ago, we thought we were experts in everything, and it took us a long time to really narrow down. So that was definitely a piece that I think is really important. The collaboration piece is huge. And sometimes it is just explaining and setting the vision for what could be that brings people to the table. I think that it is sometimes an area that maybe DMOs don't really know that they need to play in, but we certainly need to be those visionaries. And then, getting outside and learning, because as soon as you have one contact, then that opens your Rolodex to a huge number more, and not just expecting to do all those introductions yourself, but to ask others to help you.
And I think that's a really important part of all this. The simple fact is, I'm in my 5th year at Discover Halifax. It's taken me this long to start to see the success that I always aimed for and aspired to have. It didn't happen in year 1, and it sure as hell didn't happen in year 2. We might have had a little COVID thing going on as well. The reality is, it takes time. Relationships take time to form and time to build. And it's not quid pro quo. It's not transactional. It's relationship based. You're going to go and you're going to work with universities and incubators and everything else, not because you need them, but because both of you have something to gain. The simple fact is that's not going to happen overnight. And I'd say that I'm only halfway there. The reality is, what I'm doing in Halifax, I'm starting to see results, and I'm really excited for those. It's exciting when your VP or CEO gets up and tell some really great stories about the direction and results that have happened from an international conference perspective because of this strategy. But this strategy is not something that happens overnight, and it's going to take some time. So if you're not doing it, you also have to make sure you have that organizational buy-in where people understand that this is a long play and it's not going to happen overnight.
Beyond economic impact, how do you measure the regenerative handprint of conferences hosted in Halifax? The positive change that continues long after the delegates have gone, long time after the conference is finished.
Impact is an interesting one, because when we start looking at what we can do for our partners and the ecosystem as a whole, I really view conferences and events as the pointy end of the stick. It's the part that has probably the least amount of friction and is probably the easiest in terms of first step, in terms of shining the light on a given sector, whether we're talking about acid and oceans, decarbonization, whether we're talking about anything whatsoever across any single sector. To ask somebody to come and attend a conference in a different city is really a fairly small ask. There's going to be a flight, there's going to be some hotel rooms, there's going to be some dinners, and that's kind of it. The simple fact is that's a very easy way to open the door for things like foreign direct investment, in terms of getting folks to come and set up shop in your city or your country or your province or state. It's also something where if you're working collaboratively with those economic development corporations or departments, you can start looking at it beyond what happens just within the convention center itself. EIC or economic impact is great as far as conventions involved, but there's so much more that happens beyond that. Maybe all of a sudden you end up with papers that are being written around acid in the ocean. Maybe all of a sudden there's additional paths to research. Maybe all of a sudden there is additional funding that takes place. Or what could be even crazier is all of a sudden somebody says you're wrong and here's why, and then you accept that you're wrong and you pivot and you go in an entirely different direction. Those are the types of legacy that I try to measure beyond EIC. And the way that happens is through meaningful relationship-based engagement with my locals and with the organization that's coming to host in Halifax, where that's not going to be captured on a spreadsheet necessarily. It's going to be something where afterwards you sit down and you say, so how'd it go? And it's not, oh, it went good, and then it's cool, I'm done, I'm on to the next project. How'd it go? We sat down and we had this amazing discourse around X. And it turns out that where we were thinking that this would go is completely wrong, and here's why. And it opened our eyes to something completely different. I heard that the professor is now going to be co-authoring a paper and has been asked to speak over in Geneva next month. These are the types of things where we start to see legacy move beyond the traditional legacy attributes and into something that's a lot more amazing. But the other reason for that has to do with the fact that, as I said before, we're doing something that could be not great for the environment. We're putting carbon out there, we're flying all around the world, and we have to be doing that with some type of intent. If there's no intent and it's just because we're going to have a conference, then that's the wrong answer. The right answer is we're creating a legacy, either for the people that live there, the people that attend, or something's happening 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now. My gold medal standard will be that a conference comes to Halifax, and then years from now, something is published and is known as the Halifax Accords or the Halifax Convention or whatever it happens to be around something started here at a convention and it led to something far greater. Ocean as an example, the IWK, our children's hospital here, is globally recognized for a new method for using 2 or 3 x-rays to help better understand scoliosis in children. And it's now known as the Halifax method. The simple fact is those are the types of things that we want to do if we're doing conventions or conferences in Halifax, regardless if it's oceans or otherwise.
Yeah.
What can we share with the world so that either the world becomes a better place or we become better humans as a result? And for me, that's really what legacy is about. We can talk about publications and citations. We can talk about technology transfer. We can talk about dollars and cents and investment. But the reality is, if we can get together and come up with something truly amazing, then that's the legacy that we carry forward. And I wish there was a really easy way to align that against SDGs and everything else and give you a score, 0 to 100. I don't think we're there yet. Maybe one day me and ChatGPT can come up with something, but until then, the reality is being able to be close to the people that are hosting these conventions and conferences, or the ones that are doing the work on a skiff in the middle of the Bedford Basin. By being close to them, we can have these conversations and understand what that legacy is.
I love that answer.
Can you share a specific example of how hosting an ocean conference in Halifax created lasting benefits for both the research community and the broader mission of ocean health?
This is something where when we talk about the ocean and we talk about the environment, one of the biggest things we can do is shine a spotlight on what's happening and what needs to happen. We talk about the concept of selling hope and then putting objectives around that. That's certainly part of it. But the reality is, I think the ocean presents a really unique opportunity for shining a light on it. You look at how much of the ocean still remains unexplored. You look at how much of the ocean that we don't really know about. Like I said, my daughters will just say there's probably something scary deep down inside. And I have a colleague who won't don't swim in the ocean for that very reason. But the reality is, all kidding aside, there's tremendous opportunity when it comes to it. But a lot of people don't understand, they can't articulate, they can't really box in what that looks like. So whether you're talking about hosting something like Oceans 2024, which brought together some of the world's greatest thinkers when it comes to the ocean, whether we talk about the H2O conference that runs here every year, whether we talk about Bioport, which is also a yearly conference that's hosted here in Halifax, or we start thinking about the UN Ocean Decade, of which we have some locals here who are deeply involved in that. The simple fact is we start to shine a light on the ocean. We start to shine a light on regeneration. We start to shine a light on acidification. We start to shine a light on all these different pieces that people either don't understand or don't even know is taking place. They don't understand it exists. Part of that is opening the book and allowing people to say, oh my goodness, all these really cool things are happening. I can become more involved in that. The second part about that, especially here in Halifax, is all of a sudden you might have somebody who is in the social sciences or the fine arts or within a completely different sector, and they come and they attend and they're like, oh, you know what? I think I have something that I can add to this. And all of a sudden we start to see that cross-sector brilliance taking place again. Or it might be something where somebody from Life Sciences Nova Scotia shows up for an oceans conference and said, hey, from a farmer perspective, this is interesting and here's why. What I see when it comes to oceans specifically, and we start thinking about those oceans conferences, Oceans 24, H2O, and others, even DefSec, which is more on the defense and security side of things, there's a lot of things that are happening that either we don't know about, we choose not to understand, or we can't wrap our head around. And I think that is the single greatest legacy when it comes to this sector of oceans, being able to shine a light on work that Dalhousie University is doing, that's happening globally, so that maybe more people, maybe some politicians, maybe some funders, maybe some researchers just stop and take notice. Or maybe it's something where all of a sudden around a dinner table somewhere in Halifax, an old guy with gray hair is talking to his two amazing daughters and his wife, and we start talking about the oceans, and one of them decides that they want to go into it and they want to do more to help. Like those are the types of things that can happen because that type of conference exists in a given area.
Love that.
Rounding it out as the power of conferences.
Yeah. So you write that delegates aren't just attending another event, they're standing on the shore of transformation. It was a very powerful sentence. How do you help conference organizers to design experiences that live up to that promise? How are you, as Discover Halifax, getting involved in that?
I have the privilege of not having to do a thing, yet having to do it all without doing anything. The reality is, I view my role in all these cases to be a seeker of truth, somebody who is curious and who wants to understand what's happening in the bigger world, so that I can be a really great catalyst for conferences. I want to be the connector. When somebody comes here saying, hey, we're thinking about Halifax for a conference that has these areas of interest, I want to know the right people so that I can connect you. I will never be the smartest person in the room, nor do I ever expect to become that. The simple fact is my role is to understand what's happening here locally, what's happening here regionally or nationally, but also understand the context for how that fits globally or within North America or whatever it happens to be. My role is to understand how we fit and how I can help you connect with those right people, so that when the conference comes together, there's an impact that goes beyond people sitting in a room. What I try to avoid doing more than anything else is locking people into a certain vision. I will give them attributes such as transformation, hope with objectives. I will help them understand that this could be something that is a part of something far greater. But what I do not want to do, and what I try to avoid, and sometimes it can be hard, especially when you get excited about things, is I want them to see the canvas and all the tools that exist to paint that canvas. And if they choose to do something that's abstract, if they want to do something that's contemporary, great. But there's a few truths that I can share when it comes to working with these groups. And the first one is making sure that they have trust in what I'm proposing and throwing it out there as these are people that you can trust, just like you're trusting me. These are people that are doing amazing things within the context of first, best, and only. These are people that are doing something nearby that would be relevant and of interest to your people, but it's also something where you can participate in it in a meaningful way. The flow of information and content will not be unidirectional. It'll be bidirectional. It's something where you'll have the chance to do that. The other part is I will promise to work with you to find the right people to put in the room so that the conversations can be fruitful. Haligonians are really great at sharing their opinions, and that's always a good thing. And I want to make sure that the opinions that are shared with your guests, your stakeholders, your delegates, your top brass, or anyone else are ones that come from a place of wanting you to do better, wanting you to succeed. I am more than happy to put somebody in the room who will call bullshit on everything that you're saying. And that's a good thing. And the thing is, I think we've moved away from that type of healthy discourse. The fact is, that is my role. My role is to help you find those people who will not just call you out for the fact that they like calling you out, but they'll call you out for all the right reasons. And they'll provide you a different set of opinion for you to maybe consider, open your eyes, or think about. My role is that of catalyst, not one of designer. I feel that I'm very privileged to have that role. And it's certainly something where if you have other folks, other DMs that are trying to box you in, they're trying to box you in because maybe it's not as deep or breadth, or as wide in breadth as maybe they once said it was in a proposal or a LinkedIn article.
Love that.
What role do you see Halifax playing in the future of regenerative events, particularly for organizations working on climate and ocean solutions? So we talked a lot about what has happened. What are your big goals?
The big, hairy, audacious goal will always be that when Halifax has done what it does very well, people stand up and take notice and understand that it is doable, it is plausible, and it is reasonable. And we're doing it day after day. So we can be a bit of a living laboratory when it comes to this concept of regenerative conferences and events. This goes beyond just doing purchase of carbon credits to offset the flights of your delegates. This goes back to understanding the true impact that you can have on whatever it is your convention or conference happens to be. But we've also managed to understand the impact that has come from that. It's no different than ROI from a financial perspective. There's ROI from a carbon or regenerative perspective as well. It is not enough just to say we're carbon neutral. When you look at what ISO and the ISO 2012-1 certification stands for, which is all about sustainable events, it goes far beyond green. It goes into inclusion, it goes into communication, and it goes into legacy building. And I think that's really the most important piece here. The fact is there are many people that could benefit from content that's coming from abroad. We have here in Halifax, we have a very strong African Nova Scotian group. We have a very strong Indigenous people of folks that are just so curious that are coming out of the universities and high schools and colleges. That's where we start to get in something that goes beyond just the nuts and bolts of, cool, this was carbon neutral, that type of thing. And it turns into something that's far greater. And I think that's the role Halifax can play. We can be a leader in the space. I highly recommend you look at the sustainability guide that we published that's aligned to the UN SDGs. You can do that, but we can be that living case study on why events matter, but how they can do it in a way that is mindful and where impact is mitigated, especially the negative impacts, and then the positive impacts are accelerated or multiplied.
That was really what I was looking for about the next question. For conference organizers listening to this who care about hosting events with genuine purpose and impact, what would you say to convince them that place matters and that Halifax offers something that they can't get anywhere else?
Well,
you can say something else if you want, but I feel like the before was great too, so up to you.
No, I think what we've talked about over this entire time we've been together is about the idea of people, place, and product. The fact is, not a lot of places have the people. And I know a lot of places where, frankly, the people would love nothing more than to have, in the case of oceans, a real world test bed that is right there steps away from your front door. And I think a lot of people would also love to come to a place where this collaboration takes place without any pretense. The simple fact is those are the types of things that sets Halifax apart. And they're the types of things that frankly allow us to do some of the cool things that we're doing. When we start thinking about verified impact as a demonstration, when we start thinking about research that's well funded, it can always be better funded. All you have to do is speak to any of my partners at Dalhousie University or elsewhere. They'll say funding could always be better. And it could, and it should be. The simple fact is we're not starting from zero. We're working for a way to be very mindful with the funding that we have. And I see these groups every day doing it. They're making really hard choices, but they're already starting down the road. The fact is, innovation and the activity around the innovation ecosystem that we have here in Halifax is really second to none. The fact that here we are, this tiny little city on the eastern coast of Canada, and 1 in 4 grants for oceans and oceans related research goes to Dalhousie University. That just shows that there's something really special happening here. The fact that academics, industry, and government work together, not because they were forced to, but because they have to. A province of about 1 million people. We are small. We are not a rich province by any means. In fact, we would be considered a have-not province. So the scrappy nature that is Halifax and our people find a way to get it done. And I think that's something that you're not going to find elsewhere. And the simple fact is, these conferences can create this lasting change through research advancement, through policy conversations, through solution implementation. And there's people here who will help you do that, journey down that road, but they also understand the need to validate that hope with some objectives and KPIs around it. And I think that's just something that you wouldn't find elsewhere.
You have shared with us, Paul, a ton of inspiration today. You've given us some amazing best practices that I think other destinations can take and mold into what fits their unique DNA, which obviously we know is important. But we'd like to put you on the spot with 2 rapid fire questions right at the end here, because if we didn't do this, we wouldn't be really testing you. And the reason behind these questions is we really want to inspire people to think about careers in business events. We know it's not always a topic that people even know is a career opportunity or an option, but it's something that we see as very world changing when you have purpose in your work like you. So the first question is, what has been your highlight from the first half of 2025? And I'll give you the second question so you can also think about that. What question do you think we should be asking our next Canada Insider that we can present as the question from Paul Bailey?
We've had a lot of really great wins this year in the international conference space here in Halifax. I'm really excited about where things are going. I understand that right now, the geopolitics that are of this time are challenging and it can be scary. But the reality is, I'm also finding a lot of people out there that have that hope and have that inspiration to do greatness. So far this year, we've won some very significant conferences that are going to be coming to Halifax in the next couple of years. And each of these conferences offer an ability for Halifax not only to be on the stage and contributing, but it also allows us to set up some kind of legacy around them. So as an example, World Hydrogen Technology Conference will be coming here in a few short years. And this is a chance to talk about the infrastructure policy and future of hydrogen, which of course has a direct tie back to the oceans, but also has a direct tie to the environment. It has a direct tie to technology, life sciences, and so many other pieces. When you have 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000 people show up all talking about that in one place at one time, greatness is going to happen. And it's a really large conference for Halifax. We have FIG, which is a group of geospatial engineers and land surveyors. What's interesting is that whole area is certainly going through a bit of a renaissance right now. We all understand what it is here in North America, but it's playing a huge role right now in places like Africa and in the Middle East and in places like India, where land claims and history are coming together in a really interesting way. So when we see groups like that are going to come for a whole week just to discuss their policy and their future, that's absolutely huge as well. And then we have other conferences that have already signed up as well that once again we'll be announcing in the coming weeks and months ahead. And each and every one of them puts us on the stage for a different reason, but allows us to create legacy and impact. And that's what I'm super excited about. The simple fact is it's really easy to land conferences that will show up at your convention center and then leave. But this year, 90% of the conferences, or near 95, 100% of the conferences that are coming here from an international perspective, all have those 3 blocks that we talked about: the economic, the local, and the legacy components. And I'm really excited about that. Like that for me, this is 5 years in the making, and we're here, and now we're going to do it.
Congratulations. Great rapid fire positivity there. And please, anyone that's thinking of a career in this, start looking, because these are the kind of effects that you can have with your day-to-day job. So thank you for sharing, Paul. And would you have a question that you would like us to ask our next interviewee?
I would like you, more than anything else, if you're talking to anyone at all, find out who they talked to last. Who's that last expert? Who's that person that challenged them to change the way they think about the world? Who's that person that inspired them to do more? or less. Who's that person that inspired them to look at things differently? If it's a rep or somebody who runs a DMO, what have they done to get outside their office and go and meet somebody that could really help them build a legacy? If it's a planner or somebody who is looking for places to host, by the way, Halifax is a great place to host, ask them what truly matters. Don't let them say the easy stuff like food and beverage budgets and air access and the number of square feet of a convention center. Push them until they really come up with what matters, because I think we're in a really cool place right now where the world is looking at what we do very differently. And those are the things that I would be asking and pressing future guests on. Let's get out there and do something really cool and inspirational versus just doing the same old.
Yeah, fantastic. The 5 whys. Ask them the 5 whys.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for all your insights today. And we're going to wrap this portion up because we will be having more series of hopefully putting more spotlights on best practices such as this. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.